Welcome to the Hollywood Scholar. I'm Jed Morgan, and after a long series of baffling decisions in relation to the Doctor Who franchise by its creators, we have a new contender entering the arena as one of the most baffling decisions ever made in the Doctor Who franchise. We've gotten decisions like the Timeless Children and like a female doctor, and going way back into the 90s, we've got the idea of the Doctor being part human. That idea in no way comparing to the modern baffling decisions made primarily by Chris Chibnall. Returning showrunner Russell T Davies is throwing his hat into the ring for a series of baffling decisions. And his most baffling one is here, with a change to the classic villain Davros. But he's not only changing the design of Davros and the idea of Davros and the entire point of Davros, he's trying to rewrite history as well to claim that he always had a problem with Davros' design, despite him bringing Davros back in the Series 4 finale when Donna Noble was the companion to David Tennant in a very similar era to what he is trying to resurrect with the upcoming 60th anniversary specials that will be airing a week from the recording of this video. Now, this all comes from this news that RTD indicates that Davros' classic look is being retired as it's associated disability with evil. Anyone who is associating disability with evil is missing the point, and it reminds me very much like the crazy psychotic people out there who said orcs were a metaphor for black people. That's insane, and it's only coming from the people who are trying to fix that issue that they've created themselves, this issue that they perceive that never was there. All the people that they label racist, sexist, and all the other is on the phobes under the sun have never once made that connection. I've been accused of all those labels, and yet I never thought of that parallel until they brought it up. The same thing here with the idea that Davros is evil because he's disabled. That was never a thought anyone had. He was evil because he was evil. He was a monster. He wanted his creations to exterminate every living form of life. He wanted to be dominant. He was evil long prior to the life support system, which is his wheelchair, became a requirement for his continued existence. He was evil far before he was disabled. This is discrimination. This is saying disabled people cannot be evil. They cannot be villainous. No, people are people. And any type of person with whatever disability or lack thereof, or any race, sex, creed, religion, or nation can be evil. Evil doesn't discriminate when it comes to where it can come from. But Russell T Davies is discriminating and taking jobs away from disabled people, apparently, as Davros. Yes, he's focusing so much on diversity and inclusion, and yet he erased a disabled person far better than anyone in the Third Reich ever did. Now, that is a bit of hyperbole that I saw on Twitter. I had to include in this video because I thought it was a hilarious comparison, but that's what we're getting here. Yes, he's adding in wheelchair access into the TARDIS for a disabled companion. I believe in the 60th anniversaries. Maybe that's in the Christmas special or the upcoming series 14 or 15, which have been recently relabeled to series 1 and 2 because they're starting over. They are not admitting that anything's wrong. In a previous video, I mentioned that Russell T Davies said, in his own words, that he will not retcon anything from the Chris Chibnall era, including the Timeless Children. So, if there's no problem, if there's no reason to retcon, why are they starting over? That is a very interesting thing that is rife for speculation, but can't be said one way or another for sure. So going into this a little bit more, this new Davros design that we have on the left, yes, just looks more like a Yahtzee. Yes, the Daleks have always been associated with the Yahtzees. That's something that we've seen for a very, very long time. Taking him out of the wheelchair, taking away his disfigurement to make him look like this is baffling. At first, when I heard this news, when I heard about Davros looking like this, I assumed it was a flashback, and that was fine. I thought it was dumb to show prior to Genesis of the Daleks, which they do mention in this Children in Need special where all of this is derived from, but it's a flashback. It's before he was disabled, whatever. But things got so much worse in a clip from Doctor Who Unleashed that clarifies why they made this change and that this change is not going away. It is not merely a flashback. It is the truth going forward. Let's hear it from the man himself. Let's hear Russell T Davies' words out of his own mouth about Davros' redesign.
We had long conversations about bringing Davros back because he's a fantastic character. Time and society and culture and taste has moved on, and there's a problem with the Davros of old in that he's a wheelchair user who is evil.
He said it right there. He's a wheelchair user who is evil. In his very words describing why this is a problem, he reveals why it isn't a problem. He is an evil person with a wheelchair. He's not evil because he has a wheelchair. No one's ever thought this, but he's going to make that association here, and he's going to claim that this is what he always thought, despite him bringing back Davros in Series 4, back with David Tennant and Catherine Tate. He was a part of the problem, by his own admission, but he didn't want to change it. He's rewriting history, rewriting reality, which is very interesting considering that when he did bring Davros back in Series 4, Davros was attempting to eradicate reality, change reality, the death of reality itself. Now, of course, associating that phrase with what's going on right now is hyperbole, of course, but there is object fact, and trying to rewrite history, rewrite reality like he's intending to, coming up in a moment here, is baffling, and the hypocrisy is lost on him, and the irony of it is completely lost on him.
And I had problems with that, and a lot of us on the production team had the problems with that.
There, he said it. He had a problem with it, and yet he chose to bring Davros back. If he did have a problem with Davros back when Series 4 was getting developed, he could have just not included Davros. He'd been using the Daleks up to that point. Just make a new Supreme Dalek or something like that. But he chose to bring Davros back. So, did you have a problem with him, or did you not have a problem with him? Are you rewriting history to make yourself look better in this moment, acting like you've changed? You're a paragon of virtue now. I've made mistakes, but I always hated that I had to do this. No, he didn't have a problem with this back when Series 4 was getting developed, because no one cared. No one cared that Russell was gay. No one cared that Doctor Who had some progressive elements at times, and it had characters that were diverse. No one had a problem with it until modern woke identity politics made it the primary motivation and purpose of the show, which is even more so now than ever in the Christianal era. Every single piece of news, for the most part, that we get out of this current run with Russell T Davies is focusing on the diversity. We'll get into it in a moment, praising the fact that there's a trans companion, praising the fact that there's a black doctor, praising the fact that there's wheelchair accessibility in the TARDIS. They're constantly talking about how diverse and inclusive they are without talking about the story, without talking about there were mistakes in the Christian era. This is how we're going to move forward. They're constantly talking about diversity and inclusion, and that is what makes it a problem, because that's the only thing they care about. This isn't Doctor Who anymore. This isn't Russell T Davies anymore. He's rewriting his own history to be more virtuous, to seem more virtuous in the current cancel culture and woke environment of not only the BBC, but entertainment in general. And the tide is shifting, I believe, because as you can see in this very video, this clip from Doctor Who Unleashed, it is ratioed. This video, Doctor Who, is ratioed. Doctor Who is never ratioed, even in the most progressive stuff, even in the Jodie Whittaker era. Anyone who had a big problem with Jodie Whittaker or the other decisions by Russell T Davies remained mostly silent. Apathy was the biggest response of the people who did not like the decisions being made. Seeing something like this is astronomical. People who have been defending Russell T Davies, people who have been defending this era and the Christianal era are turning against it. That is something that we've never seen before. Hopefully this backlash is enough for them to question. I doubt it will be. It never ever is. But it is fascinating to see how many people are turning against this, because even a select group of woke people are realizing this is discrimination. You're changing something from the past, saying that you always had a problem with it, even though you perpetuated this supposed problem, and erase a disabled person from history. Let's continue with his comments.
Associating disability with evil, and trust me, there's a very long tradition of this. I'm not blaming people in the past at all, but the world changes, and when the world changes, Doctor Who has to change as well. So we made the choice to bring back Davros without the facial scarring and without the wheelchair or his support unit, which functions as a wheelchair. I say this is...
He said it functions as a wheelchair, but it's serving a lot of other purposes. Davros is the way he is because he's artificially extended his life. The Time Lord's way of doing things is not necessarily natural, but it is a very fundamental aspect of them at this point. It's very organic feeling. He is propping himself up to be a cyborg just to continue on a life similar to the Doctor's. It's not about disability being evil. It was never about that. But I do need to make a disclaimer here. Of course, that actor is doing a great job as Davros. He's played Davros in the past. He does absolutely a fantastic job. And seeing a young Davros is something interesting that I would like to see in a different era, with different priorities being behind seeing this version of Davros as a younger man prior to his cybernetic changes. I have nothing against that man in it. The actor, I have nothing against him. Want to make that very clear.
How we see Davros now. This is what he looks like. This is 2023. This is our lens. This is our eye. Things used to be in black and white. They're not in black and white anymore.
Now, it's those comments here that are making me very suspicious, because he's saying this is our lens now. This is our Davros now. So this isn't just a flashback. That's not all it is, as I originally assumed. It's whatever if it's just a flashback, kind of dumb. And especially when you see the clip itself, it's very dumb with how much they degrade the intimidation factor of the Daleks with the plunger. I'll get into that in just a minute here. But the idea that this is Davros going forward, and potentially even saying this is how he always was, rewriting the history of Doctor Who to say he was never in a chair. This is what he always was. Just imagine it in the previous episodes that he looked like this more Yahtzee looking man rather than the man in the wheelchair or in the life support system that we've all come to love as an antagonist. He's saying, just like the episodes used to be black and white, but they're in color now. We have to imagine that the original stories were in color. He's changing Davros. That is what I believe is how he's going to move forward with this version of Davros, is just kind of pretend that it was always this version of Davros and move on as if that's how it's always been. Some people are speculating that the last time we saw Davros was during the 12th Doctor's run, Peter Capaldi's run, where the 12th Doctor's regeneration abilities were drained by Davros and the Daleks. It was very stupid. I hate that arc. There's a lot of problems with it, but they're saying that perhaps that regeneration energy that Davros had the last time we saw him was used to restore his body and return him to this earlier version of himself where he didn't need the wheelchair. That, I think, is far less likely beyond the kind of cliche and pathetic nature of it, but it undercuts the message that Russell T Davies is focusing on with the bad association with the wheelchair. That association would still exist. It would say, oh, he's better now that he doesn't have a disability according to their lens. And I just can't see him going forward with that interpretation of the story with the 12th Doctor moving forward with Davros.
Davros used to look like that, and he looks like this now. And that we are absolutely standing by. I think because it's Children in Need night, it's a night where issues of disability or otherness or being excluded from society come right to the front of the conversation. So of all the nights to make this change, I thought it was absolutely vital to do this. And I'm very, very, very proud of the fact that we have.
Okay, cut that.
What does this send a message to with these children in need? It's saying, you are just pure, you're innocent, you can do no wrong. That is a bad thing for children to learn. Yes, disability is not their fault. Disability is not a bad thing. No one's been saying that except for these woke people projecting this idea onto their supposed enemies. And that's what the message that they're sending, more importantly, is, hey, some people think you're evil because you have a disability, but we're going to fix that because we know you're little angels that can't do anything wrong. No, anybody can be anything. Evil does not discriminate in its origin. Now, moving on, there's a lot of interesting things to come out of all this. Like I mentioned previously, people are standing up to it, and people are rejecting this. So this is the clip, the same clip I just showed you on Twitter, and the comments are full of people saying it's very ableist of him to do this. Even woke people are coming at it with woke titles like ableist and using the language of wokeness to counteract the supposed woke point. Woke and woke crime is one of the most beautiful things, and this is a great example of it. RIP Doctor Who. There is a lot of people rejecting this, and that is the most beautiful thing to come out of all this. I wish this would have happened more with the Timeless Children. Yes, the response to the Timeless Children was astronomical, but it kind of fizzled out as apathy set in. But this is a beautiful thing to see Doctor Who fans standing up to the bastardization of lore and canon that is being perpetuated by Russell T Davies. Interestingly enough, one of David Tennant's lines from this Children in Need special says, "Canon and the timeline are breaking." Canon and the timeline have been broken for a long time, at least since the Timeless Children was introduced and eradicated any sense of continuity that this show once had. He's only making it worse. Russell T Davies is not a savior. I don't see how anyone can believe that he will fix Doctor Who at this point. I had a modicum of hope when it was first announced because he created some great television back in 2005 through 2009. Some of my favorite television ever is those early seasons of New Who, but he's not that man anymore. So I really don't understand people who think that he's the savior, that Doctor Who will go back to the way it was. I honestly don't understand. I would love to talk to someone who can have hope after decisions like this, hope after Russell T Davies said he will not retcon the Timeless Children, and in fact will support it in some of these episodes coming up. And in Children in Need, he supported the Jodie Whittaker run as being brilliant, with David Tennant saying 60 minutes ago, I was a really brilliant woman. This is what I tweeted out when we heard this. Look how they massacred my boy. Hashtag not my Davros. Apparently disabled people can't be bad guys anymore, which is discrimination. This is rewriting reality. This is the destruction of canon, the Doctor Who franchise reality. That's what canon is reality within a television show. They're trying to rewrite it. They're trying to rewrite their own history. Russell T Davies saying, I always had a problem with this. I always knew it was wrong. I was always virtuous, but it was what it was, and I'm trying to fix it now. It's incredibly pompous and arrogant, and frankly, to use a woke title, ableist of him, as that previous reply said. There's this clip as well that Doctor Who shared from the Children in Need special that shows David Tennant arriving at the genesis of the Daleks. And I want to watch part of it because it degrades the intimidation factor of the Daleks. The Daleks are one of the most frightening creatures in this universe, despite originally looking like upside down trash cans with a whisk and a plunger. One of the greatest Doctor Who episodes is one called Dalek in series 1 of New Who, where he showed one Dalek eviscerating an entire compound of heavily trained soldiers. That was intimidating. It set up this antagonist to be one of the most fearsome foes in the franchise. Now, look at where the Daleks are in this new version of Russell T Davies' Doctor Who.
That's a Dalek. Oh, good word. Dalek.
We've got this man here who is one of the worst actors I've ever seen, who's getting the idea for the name of the Daleks from David Tennant, who's accidentally stumbled here right after his regeneration, and he's going to change the very genesis of the Daleks. And I want to get into talking about the genesis in a moment here, but the Doctor is now responsible for the name Daleks being associated with these creatures. That's utterly insane canon-wise. And yes, Children in Need specials, their canon and episodes like this, mini episodes like this, the canon viability of them has always been murky. That's why a lot of them don't include much canon information like this. They don't go to essential history points like the creation of the Dalek. So maybe this is going to be retcon, but with how much inference that Russell T Davies himself puts on this change in Davros's design, we can assume that he intends this to be 100% canon moving forward.
Yes, that's it. I'm lucky I wasn't exterminated. Exterminated? Yes.
Yes, he gives them the iconic phrase, exterminate, exterminate, a fearsome phrase from a fearsome foe. And this quirky music continues to undercut how intimidating Daleks are. This is a terrible choice for a Children in Need special. This is a non-profit charity event that they're doing, and they're using it to rewrite not just the history of the show, but their own personal histories while undercutting the Daleks as an antagonist. They are damaging so much with this Children in Need special.
But yes! Good word, great. Wait a minute, do you mean this is the genesis of the Daleks?
They use the words, they say genesis of the Daleks. For those of you who aren't familiar, one of the greatest arcs in Doctor Who history during the Fourth Doctor's run was called Genesis of the Daleks, when Tom Baker himself went to virtually the creation of the Daleks, and he was able to make that choice, make the iconic choice. Does he have the right? These two wires, if they're connected, will eradicate the Daleks entirely. The early on experiments that he's found of the Daleks, the octopus type style of them outside of their casing, he will be able to kill them all in this moment. But does he have the right to commit genocide? That philosophy is an interesting thing that he had to wrestle with, and it was a dark moment for him. He struggled with it. It was heartbreaking to see a person in this position. It's the classic conundrum of, if you had the choice to kill baby Hitler, would you do it? It's a difficult choice that doesn't necessarily have a right answer, but it's fascinating to explore. And yet they undercut this story just as much as they undercut the Daleks by, ooh, quirky, oh, this is the genesis of the Daleks, throwing it off like it's some casual, quirky event. Now, I do want to skip some of this because it's strange and not necessarily all that important, but the Doctor broke off the claw of this prototype Dalek, and he's going to replace it. What is he going to replace it with? You think something cool? No. This is how they introduce the plunger to the Daleks design, mocking the Daleks even further. That's how the Dalek gets its plunger design. And in a moment here that this clip doesn't include, Davros walks in, looks at the plunger. There's dramatic, loving music as he says, "Brilliant." That is the design origin of the Dalek's plunger. That's what we've got from Russell T Davies. That is what we can expect from the upcoming 60th anniversary specials, as well as series 1 and 2 coming thereafter. Now, there are a few other things I want to talk about. Russell T Davies has been doing a lot of interviews where he talks about how important diversity is to him, showing once again that this is his primary priority with coming back to the franchise and writing Doctor Who. His diversity is the most important thing. RTD eviscerates haters ahead of Yasmin Finney's Doctor Who debut. So Yasmin Finney's character, from what we know at this point, it doesn't really make sense how there's a trans child of Donna who's called Rose when Donna doesn't remember the name Rose, and Rose was obviously not the biological birth name of this person, but this trans individual is being paraded around as a savior. Yasmin even has comments about how diversity is like the second coming of Jesus. Now, that might be a little hyperbole on my part, but we will get into those comments in just a moment here. So in talking about this, It's a Sin creator Russell T Davies said, "It's something I and a lot of other writers are keen to do, to be progressive, to reflect more of society." Again, showing where his priorities lie, not in telling good Doctor Who, not about giving the fans a show that they can love, about rewriting the past to be more progressive and in key with more of society. He went on to say, "There is a lot of people who are full of absolute hate and venom and destruction and violence who like to see that sort of thing wiped off the screen entirely." Where are these people that he's talking about? The people that he's referring to aren't full of hate, venom, and destruction, let alone violence. He's reading into a situation that doesn't exist. The people who think the Yasmin Finney situation is cringe, like myself, are coming at it from a writing perspective. How is Donna's child trans named Rose when no one knows who Rose is or the impact of that name when that name had to have been a chosen one? And our bigger problem with it, even more than that, is because this is their priority. They're choosing this over good storytelling. There are plenty of examples of the past when diversity was included into projects that it was done well, where the storytelling was the chief priority from the writers, directors, and producers, and everyone else involved. No one has a problem with those because storytelling needs to be the chief priority of a storytelling medium. I know that's insane, but they're writing it off as, oh, anyone who doesn't like it, they're just full of hate and they want to commit violence and stuff. No one wants to commit violence. You're just trying to eradicate any criticism. If you can paint this straw man argument that anyone who disagrees with you is full of hate and violence, that makes you seem like you're untouchable, that you must be right. If your foe is of this extreme violent nature, who could say that you were wrong to do what you did? You, of course, are the right person. You did not resort to violence. No one has resorted to violence. And doing the straw man argument does not support his case with logical, common sense thinking people from any side of a political spectrum. Now, this is where the comments I mentioned previously about Yasmin Finney come up in this article. Yasmin Finney said these comments about a year ago, and I made a video about it. But this word-for-word quote from this article says, "In July, 20-year-old Finney told Pink News that she felt she was put on this earth to make a change. I'm still gagged that I'm the person that gets to be the first positive representation of trans people in UK media." That's obviously not true, but this is a very arrogant perspective to come at it. This person, Yasmin, is going to change the world. Oh my God, I'm so important. Everyone's going to remember my name. I'm changing everything. The way that I get through it all is just knowing that there's a deeper meaning and I was put on this earth to make a change. I'm hoping that everything I do with the representation that I'm giving people, they can see themselves represented and they can see a positive side being a queer person. Again, this actor is showing warped priorities when it comes to a storytelling medium, just like Russell T Davies himself. So this continued priority from Russell T Davies and the people behind Doctor Who currently to say diversity is king, diversity is the most important thing, while being unironically even more discriminatory than any of their predecessors, is a track record that will continue to destroy Doctor Who even more than it always has been. I expect there will be a sharp increase in viewership for the 60th anniversary coming off the regeneration of Jodie Whittaker, just because that era is so bad that there are people who are curious to see what Russell T Davies is doing, and then the star power of seeing David Tennant return with nostalgia characters coming back as well, like Donald Noble and fan-loved Wilfred Mott, who's one of my favorite characters in Doctor Who. That's going to see a bump in viewership. but will it continue into the future of the franchise? Will anyone stomach even the third part of the 60th anniversary specials? I cannot wait till next week to see the viewership figures of this, because Russell T Davies is proving that he might even be worse than Chris Chibnall. I believe Chris Chibnall did a lot of what he did out of malice, out of hatred for the franchise and the fandom, but I believe a large portion of it was stupidity as well, and a false sense of his own importance. Russell T Davies, being a man who once created some of the best television ever created, in my opinion, to come back to that same franchise and do this to it is far more deplorable than anything Chris Chibnall could have done to Doctor Who, even with the Timeless Children. Russell T Davies' name will not be remembered fondly by the Doctor Who franchise and its fan base anymore after he continues this work that he's begun with Davros in this Children in Need special, which is only indicative of his priorities going forward and the future of the Doctor Who franchise. But anyway, that's all I have for today. I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments below. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Anon.
Hey, yo, are you feeling what I'm doing up in here? Oh, I know you are. Do you miss all the good, compelling stories that we used to get back in Hollywood that they ain't putting down no more? I know you missing it. So check out my book series, Odyssey of a Phoenix, a mythological epic about philosophy, morality, and modern-day mental illness issues, baby. Book 1, Down in Flames. Book 2, Apocalypse Then. These are currently on sale. What are you waiting for? Get your hands on them. And we got Book 3, Kill the Dark, is coming down the pipeline. Just wait for all the good stuff that's dropping. You ain't gonna be disappointed, fam.